Hi there, I'm Lee Nida. I'm a literacy specialist with the Minnesota Department of Education.
And I'm Jake Senchins, Education Services Director at the Northwest Service Cooperative, one of the Minnesota Service Cooperatives. Thank you for watching this webinar to better understand the 2020 ELA Foundational Reading Standards.
This webinar is one of a series of recorded webinars intended for teachers and administrators to watch as they work toward implementation of the 2020 ELA standards in the 2025-26 school year. We will be releasing these webinars in waves or sets, but we hope that districts will use these as they align with their own district needs. Assessing the standards will tie in with many of the webinars. The Minnesota Department of Education is committed to equity. The foundational standards speak directly to the commitment to starting early and teaching all students how to break the code in reading in the early grades. Topics covered in this webinar are: what are the foundational standards? What does it mean that these grade level benchmarks are building blocks? And what evidence-based instructional practices will help in the teaching of foundational reading standards? As the slide shows, Reading 1 and Writing 1 are foundational anchor standards that have between 1 and 4 benchmarks for each standard. Foundational anchor standards, although not designated in all grade levels, provide the building blocks needed to prepare and launch successful readers and writers. A learning progression for these standards is provided. This webinar focuses on the foundational reading standard, Reading 1, which says, demonstrate knowledge of oral language, phonological and phonemic awareness, phonics, and morphology to read accurately and fluently. What you see on the screen are two illustrative models of how we know skilled reading comprehension is developed in students' brains. First is the simple view of reading developed by Goff and Tunmer. Below that is Scarborough's reading rope, developed by Hollis Scarborough. The foundational reading standards focus on the word recognition skills in these two models.
We recommend this approach with an emphasis on word recognition skills because all students need to be taught how to break the code. Word recognition skills should be taught in a systematic manner. Systematic instruction follows a planned specific scope and sequence, building from simple to complex. Corrective feedback and continuous progress monitoring are key to systematic instruction. Systematic instruction runs counter to the notion that students will learn how to read solely from exposure to text. As you can see in the table on this slide, many of the foundational benchmarks in the ELA standards follow a progression. Phonics follows a progression, and this is reflected in the benchmarks from kindergarten up to 6th grade. Looking at our example, a student would move from decoding act, a CV pattern word, to active, a multisyllable word, to activate, a word that also has the suffix ate. Another example is the progression in decoding from sum, a CVC word, to summary, a multisyllable word, to summative, a multisyllable word with the IVE suffix, meaning causing or making. It's important to note that students who master basic phonics skills will still need instruction on advanced skills. These advanced phonics skills taught in the 4th through 6th grade benchmarks focus on word origin and tie in with vocabulary and meaning making. In the case of our previous example, activate, older students would learn that ate means to cause or make. So in this case, activate would literally mean to make active. Learning meanings of prefixes, suffixes, and roots also serves to increase student vocabulary as they apply these meanings to other multisyllable words. In addition to following a progression, phonics should also be taught to mastery. For students who have not mastered the grade level benchmark, additional instruction and intervention support should be utilized. The Minnesota MTSS framework provides a model for varying levels of instruction to support students working toward mastery of the benchmarks. Here are some instructional resources to support teaching the skills in the foundational reading standards and benchmarks. The IES Practice Guide makes the recommendations that we should develop awareness of the segments of sounds in speech and how they link to letters, teach students to decode words, analyze word parts, and write and recognize words, ensure that each student reads connected text every day to support reading accuracy, fluency, and comprehension, teach students academic language skills, including the use of inferential and narrative language and vocabulary. Researcher Nell Duke has this article about word recognition prompts when young readers get stuck. Another instructional resource is using decodable texts as practice. The Reading League maintains a list of decodable texts that provide support in context. Scope and sequence should guide choices in decodable texts. Don't throw out your leveled readers, just use them at a different time of day. They don't directly support phonics learning, but they have value for teaching other important reading skills. Lee will give some examples in the following slides of how these instructional practices can be used.
Sorry, I was muted. We hope that these examples will help teachers understand some ways that they might apply instructional practices in their classroom, as well as giving administrators some look-fors and listen-for cues when observing in classrooms. The IES Practice Guide on Foundational Reading recommends instruction in phonemic awareness as early as possible in a student's schooling. The guide explains that once students know a few consonant and vowel sounds and their corresponding letters, they can begin sounding out simple words with those sounds in phonics lessons. Phonemic awareness includes syllable level, onset rhyme level, and individual sound level awareness. And this example on the screen demonstrates the onset rhyme awareness and shows the direct instruction and guided practice elements of a phonemic awareness lesson. I will read what's on the screen so you can hear how the instruction could sound. I'm going to say two parts of a word and then put the parts together into a word. K, at, cat. Did you hear the k at the beginning of the word, followed by the at the end? Let's do one together. Listen to the two parts of the word, and then we'll put it together. K, an. Put the two parts together. K, an makes can. Do cat and can have the same ending sound? No. At is different from an. Some words that do have the at sound at the end are hat and sat. Cat, hat, and sat rhyme. Words that rhyme have the same sound at the end. What are some words that have the an sound at the end? Those words will rhyme with can. That was fun, being a first grade teacher again. The IES Practice Guide on Foundational Reading recommends instruction in phonics that encourages students to sound out smoothly, connecting sounds as much as possible. Teaching students to decode words and word parts is key to helping them decode unfamiliar words. The example on the screen illustrates the modeling aspect of explicit instruction in phonics. I will read what is on the screen so that you hear how instruction could sound. I am going to show you how to sound out a word, one sound at a time. We'll look at a word with sounds that we have learned. When I look at, and here the word hog would be written on the board, I ask myself how the word starts. I ask myself what the O sounds like in a closed syllable. Ah. I ask myself what sound the G makes. G. Then I slide through the sounds, hog, and say the word hog. Let's try one together. In this last example, the prompts on the screen draw a student's attention to the word. Look at the word. Slide through each sound. Break the word into parts. Try a different sound. These prompts come from Nell Duke's article, When Young Readers Get Stuck. We hope that these prompts are clear to teachers and are usable as early as tomorrow. These are also good listen-fors for administrators. You will see that we are not asking students at the point of word identification to consider context or illustrations, as these are both prompts for checking meaning and draw the student's attention away from the word that needs to be decoded. Thinking back to Scarborough's rope, we saw that word identification is a key skill linked to the foundational reading standard, Reading One.
As we look at our instructional practices, we also need to consider differentiation. So we have some guidelines around differentiation for teaching the foundational skills. We want to use the evidence-based practice of small group instruction to ensure that each student is getting the level of practice that they need. We should be using screening and diagnostic data to inform the instruction. The scope and sequence should be the same for all, the pace may be varied. Time is a factor in differentiation. How can we use that transition time to have fun with wordplay? Not for instruction, but for extended practice. Things such as, when in line, turn to your neighbor and use the word of the day or a phrase in a sentence. Saying a word that rhymes with hop as your permission to line up. Or line up with shades of meaning cold, frigid, chilly, so a synonym, and line up to the person whose meaning is closest to yours. We recognize that time is an educator's most precious commodity and is a major factor in differentiation. MDE does not recommend one method of arranging a literacy block, but there is research that can help districts make decisions about creative arrangements of minutes for ELA instruction. There are three well-known concepts of differentiation, plus another piece. Differentiate content. Teachers are offering instruction on the skill that individuals most need in the sequence. We can differentiate the process. Teachers relay content in different manner or dosage to individual students. We can differentiate the product, where the teacher allows various ways for students to demonstrate mastery. And we can differentiate the effector learning environment. The teacher ensures that the individual students are comfortable to learn. When it comes to teaching the foundational skills in the new ELA standards and benchmarks systematically, we are primarily focused on differentiating the content within the evidence-based practice of small group explicit instruction. This is the instruction itself, not simply the reading level of the text. Teachers differentiate the process through intervention, for example, within an MTSS framework, allowing students who need an increased amount of instruction additional opportunities. When students demonstrate their phonics knowledge, there are ample opportunities to differentiate the product in demonstrating mastery through the use of manipulatives, writing, or reading. It is also important to consider differentiating the learning environment to ensure students are in the best physical setting for them to learn.
The screen shows the navigation to the ELA Standards Implementation page, which will be where these recorded webinars and the slideshow will be kept. On this page, keep an eye out for a Foundations Overview document, Learning Progressions documents, and the already posted implementation timeline. Other valuable MDE sites are the MDE Standards portal and the Compass page. This slide shows some additional resources for two groups of people. At the top, for those who want to access intensive training in foundational reading skills, they can look at the accredited independent teacher training programs that the Center for Effective Reading Instruction has listed. And the second bullet gives some resources for those who are just now ready to take the first step into learning about the science of reading. And there's a reading recommendation, a listening recommendation, and a watching recommendation for a staff to engage in together. Thank you. Please feel free to send questions directly to me at the email address on the screen. Also, keep an eye out for additional webinars in the 2020 ELA Standards Implementation Support Series, as well as notice of additional implementation supports from the Minnesota Service Cooperatives. The PowerPoint slides used in this presentation are available on the MDE ELA implementation page.
Thanks for joining us.